think about how in this moment, you can't tell me that Lucifer was not on him at this moment also, where he could have easily just stood over his parents and said,
tell him who you are, man.
Get out of my way.
Obviously, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Get out of my way. I'm not listening. I don't have to listen to you. You know what I'm saying? Or whatever. Right. But
we are Saints in the South, your source for gospel growth and good times. All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Saints in the South, episode 151. We are in Matthew chapter 2 and Luke chapter 2. And the title of it is, We Have Come to Worship Him. So we will
this
go
is
ahead
our
and jump in there.
Christmas discussion.
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
Oh.
Yep.
Yeah, not too long after Christmas, I guess, a couple of weeks. But here we go. It starts right out with wise men. Just as this podcast started off with wise men.
Three wise men. We got three wise men on here, man.
Well, you know, and you bring up a good point, Jackson. How many were there? We really don't know.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I was about to say.
We do know there's more than one because it's
commonly believed that there was three, but yeah, that we don't know that for sure.
Right. We know there were at least two because of the word men, I guess.
Men, and but because there were three gifts, we kind of assumed that there were three.
Well, one guy was he kind of did a little extra. He brought a couple extra. He brought two gifts, you know. No,
it might have been four, and two of them brought gold.
Hey, might have been four, and one guy didn't bring anything. You know, who's this cat? But anyway, that's why he wasn't mentioned in the song "We Three Kings." Okay, so wise men. So starting it off, talk a little bit about the wise men, who they were, pretty much why they were even involved. Honestly, what was this story? Why did it come out? You know, why is it such a popular thing? I will say this. I'll go ahead and start off. Let's start it off with Bruce R. McConkie. That's a good way to go. Bruce R. McConkie observed. Going to McConkie it up here. It would appear that they were true prophets. Talking about the wise men. They were true prophets, righteous persons like Simeon, Anna, and the shepherds, to whom deity revealed that the promised Messiah had been born among men. Obviously, they were in possession of ancient prophecies, telling of the rise of a new star at his birth, that they did receive revelation for their personal guidance is seen from the inspired dream in which they were warned not to return to Herod after they had found and worshiped the Son of Mary. So these, according to Bruce R. McConkie, and according really just to the scriptures as we read them, as we understand them, these were true prophets, these wise men. We talk about them, you know, in many different ways, but they were really prophets. They knew of the history and the scriptural things, that, you know, all the things from scripture and ancient scripture, and they knew had all these teachings, and they knew what to look for. Because also they received revelation, what to look for. They learned that the star was a sign. You know, that was a sign given to them to find Christ. You know, that was the reason they followed it, is because they got personal revelation that is where to go. You know, I don't know if y'all got anything you want to throw in there.
Yeah, and so Herod was quite perturbed.
Yeah, King Herod, man,
he was very familiar with the prophecy.
Yes.
So yeah, he was definitely to say that Herod felt threatened, I feel like would be an understatement here. This was this wasn't just something that the Jews believed, I guess. This is something that these prophecies, I can only imagine, were so well known that it was, you know, even, you know, something that I would imagine somebody like Herod could just be like, whatever, you know, this is some of their silly Jew superstition stuff or something, you know, but he took it seriously enough to where he was like, hey, this is a big deal. I need to find this kid and he needs to be gone, because obviously there's a threat to my authority here. That's in the works.
So I love, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to mention, and it was very common back then for kings to feel threatened. I mean, they were very guarded in their approach and the way they lived and who they held close to them. And so this and everybody was expecting this the Christ to come in and take over physically, right? So
Right.
I mean, he was just kind of going along with the custom
Yeah.
of
Because most of the Jews believed that he was going to be a great military leader, and he was going to free the Jews, which goes into a little side note here. I wasn't planning on mentioning this, but it's just really, really interesting to me. A little side note about Bar Kokhba. I know y'all have heard me talk about him before. I know, he is, to me, one of the most interesting historical figures of all time to study. Like, it's crazy because I didn't even know who Bar Kokhba was until I took a New Testament class in my undergrad, and like, I was like, what, this guy? So he was, during the time of Jesus, we know that there was lots of people claiming to be the Messiah. He wasn't the only one. There was many men who were like, it's me, I'm the Messiah, blah, 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 because everybody knew about the prophecies, and, everybody had their delusions of grandeur, I guess. And the way I see it, Satan was trying to confuse people by saying, hey, we're just going to, if I can't stop Christ from coming into the world, I'm just going to like throw as much confusion in the mix as I can and just have everybody saying that they're the Christ. And Jesus was just one among many who was rejected by the Jews, but Bar Kokhba was one who was actually accepted because he fit all the criteria of what the Jews expected to be as far as a great military leader. So that's a little sidetrack I won't go down, but I definitely, if you're interested in interesting kind of trivia around this, definitely look up some stuff about Bar Kokhba. Yeah, he actually had his own coins pressed. He had taken the coins from the Roman Empire that had Caesar's face on them and pressed his own face on them and all kinds of stuff. He was taking over, man. He planned to fully take over, and there was a lot of people that followed him. There was a lot of people that believed that he was the Messiah.
Wow. It's an interesting thought about that is, thinking about what people believed, what Christ would do during his reign here on earth. I could see why many people would start proclaiming so they could try and achieve that power, right? That they assumed he was going to get. But if they truly understood what the Messiah was going to go through, that number probably would have dropped dramatically. I would think. Knowing what Christ was going to go through, they're like, no, thanks. I'm not him.
Yeah. I like funny. I've never thought about it that way, but I'm sure there's many of them afterward that were like, hey, actually, I don't think I would have wanted to go through all that.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
You remember, I don't know what, we might be going off on tangents here, but you're talking about, what you're talking about, Kenny, and it made me think of, you remember David Koresh?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So he obviously, he claimed, this was probably what year was this? Late 80s, early 90s? I don't remember.
It was 90s.
Was it 90s?
It was 90s.
Okay. I can't remember.
Somewhere around that period. I can't remember.
Yeah.
What year exactly,
okay. So I remember. I'll look it up. Well, I just remember that you're talking about people that claim to be Christ. They claim to be the Messiah and stuff, which he did, but and what was interesting, I was sitting there, we was watching the news. My dad was with me, and I was just sitting there, this guy was doing an interview or something, and they were talking to him, and I was sitting there just watching him. And for those that don't know, he wore glasses. Dave Koresh wore glasses. And I sat there thinking the whole time, I was like, if this dude, and I remember telling my dad, I was like, if this dude is Christ, why does he need glasses? He should have perfect eyesight. Is that not just a red flag number one? He can't heal his own eyes. What's going on? So I don't know why I thought that's a whole, you ain't got to put all that in there. That's something I thought about it.
No, it's in there now, man. It's early 90s or early 90s. 93 was the siege in Waco, Texas.
Okay. Wow. That's crazy. Yeah. So going back to these wise men, I like the fact that they say wise men. They've said kings. They could have been kings. They could have been, obviously we say prophets. There were so many things, but I like that they chose the word wise, which, that's what we have in our English translation, wise. But I like it because they were wise, because they followed the scriptures. But what's interesting about this is that King Herod, is as evil as he was, he was basically paranoid. He was a paranoid person. The reason he had all those babies killed just to try to figure out where, it's just crazy stuff, to keep his power. But anyway, it says in verse 4, it says, and when he had gathered all the chief, so this is King Herod, and when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he demanded of them where Christ should be born. And they said unto him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for thus is written by the prophet. And the prophet they're talking about is the prophet Micah, which said that he would be born in the house of bread, which is Bethlehem. And so it's just interesting to me, if you think about it, and this isn't direct, but if you think about it in a way, King Herod chose to believe the scriptures in this instance. He went to the scriptures.
Right. Yeah.
He chose to believe these scriptures. But obviously it was for his own gain. It was for his own self-service, to find out where the newborn threat was, basically, and to exterminate it. But it made me think that, believing's not enough. You can't just believe in the scriptures. You've got to do something. You gotta do what they tell you to do. You know what I mean? You got to live the way that it tells you to live. You can't just read them and say, those are great words. I know those words are good words. Those are great things. I mean, you got to really, so like I say, the Boyd K. Packer, true doctrine understood changes attitudes and behavior.
Right.
It's true. But believing is not enough, because King Herod believed obviously in the scriptures, or he would not have said, hey, well, let's get to Bethlehem and let's go find this kid. He's obviously there. It's written by the prophet, so it's just interesting. God knows exactly too. This is another thought I had. God knows exactly just how much to reveal in the scriptures. Because if God had revealed in there that, yes, he's born in Bethlehem, and yes, they're going to try to escape to Egypt to get away from King Herod. I mean, if he'd put all that in there, King Herod would have had it and said, oh, I know what their plan is.
That's right.
The Lord's only going to reveal what we need to know. He will not have his plan frustrated.
Right. He did reveal that Christ would be a child from Nazareth, right?
Right.
And that he would live in Egypt, so there were different little hints, but he didn't know exactly how that would come about.
Exactly.
One other thing that I've thought about is kind of a what if scenario, trying to figure out why it was necessary that Christ be born in the lowliest of circumstances. What if he was born into a rich family and had everything that he needed? Would we look at him in a different way? I don't know. I wonder.
I would think so. I actually had that same thought as I read about this. Where was it at? Oh, I wish I had it right here in front of me. But anyway, I had that same thought about if he had been born in a high society or with privileges and access to anything he needed and all these things. Absolutely. I think that would have, at least it would have been, I think if you believe in Jesus Christ, you believe in Jesus Christ. Right. So, but what I'm getting to is, because you look at the principles he taught, that's what you believe in, and that's what to be true, and all these other things. So that leads to, he's the savior, and et cetera, et cetera. If you follow the Spirit, you're going to get there. But if it had been that circumstance and we saw that, I think it would make it so much easier for people to deny him or
turn away,
or to write him off.
That's right.
Oh, of course he knew the scriptures so well. He had access to all these libraries or all these things, whatever. They could have made up anything.
So let me tell you my opinion on that is that if Jesus had been born to an affluent family, born into wealth,
right,
we may or may not have seen him differently, but I think we would see each other differently. Because I feel like a big part of the reason that he was born in the circumstances he was because one of the things that he taught, in his earthly ministry was, about the loving people, treating each other, everyone is your brother, treating your brother, and there was a lot of people during that time that felt that, your station in life was a reflection of your righteousness or a reflection of your favor, of God's favor. So, people who were poor were often looked at as like, well, they've got a lot of sin in their life. They got some problems, or they're not favored by God.
Right.
And, when Jesus came along with his teachings, he kind of turned all that on its head. And so a lot of that, I feel like, started with his birth, because the fact that he was born in such humble circumstances tells us that you never know what great things, what humble beginnings can, I guess what I'm trying to think how to say it. What kind of great things can come from such humble beginnings?
Right. Yeah. We see more potential.
I like that.
There's a lot more potential to be gained from a zero plane, a zero starting point, right? If he started at level 30, how do I feel? Exactly. Like, how would I feel? Like, well, I'm here on level 10. There's no way. I mean, he was already there when he did, but knowing he started from the lowest he descended below all. I mean, it says that. And so he had to get, okay. So think about this, to lift us all, he has to get below us all. You know what I mean? You can't lift something unless you're under it. And so it sort of makes sense in a common sense type way like that. It's sort of a practical way like that. Obviously there's more to it than that.
Yeah.
But he had to really start below. He is the foundation, which means he is underneath all that. He has to hold that up. And so he has to go all the way down, man. Elder Bruce Porter said something about this really good. Exactly what we're talking about. He said, his birth, talking about the Savior, his birth, like his life, teaches us that there's nothing wrong with humble origins, with poverty, simplicity, and obscurity. There is nothing to be ashamed of in being outcast from society, in being forced to dwell apart from the world, literally or figuratively. Poverty is no disgrace, and a shelter for animals may be a temple of God's Spirit as surely as any more elegant dwelling. Christ's birth and simple upbringing are a reminder to us that we must never look down on anyone because of their origins or worldly status. If we scorn the humble, we may unwittingly scorn the chosen of God's children on the earth.
Boom.
It's pretty heavy
like
stuff, man. Oh man.
Not to deviate too far, but I'm kind of you're making me think about the Stetson Bennett story.
I know. It's true. Started with nothing. He's a walk-on.
He's a walk-on, man. Had to transfer out.
Don't get me started.
Hey, no, but seriously though, there's something about the underdog story or somebody coming from nothing, right? And just overcoming all odds.
Yeah, we love those stories.
We absolutely love them. Yeah.
Well, speaking of football, the Kurt Warner story is really good.
Great movie. Great movie.
American Underdog.
American Underdog. Good. Yeah. Very good story. Yep.
Plug it.
So there's something interesting that I learned in my study for this lesson this week that I never knew before. Did you know that babies were salted at birth?
Didn't.
For what?
Did not.
Yeah, Expound. So this is interesting. So this comes from Rebecca Holt Stay, instructor of biblical studies, BYU continuing education. I'll read just some bits and pieces of this. She says there's not a lot of description in antiquity of the details of something as mundane as birth. And so when it gets mentioned, it's usually done in some kind of symbolic context or in telling a story. And probably the most powerful place where a story of birth is told is in Ezekiel 16, which describes the birth of the nation of Israel. And so it talks about that. One of the things it says is that the Israel was not swaddled and was not salted. And it was interesting. So she goes on to say, it talks about the different steps of what would happen when a child is born. And she said, first, the umbilical cord would be cut, probably tied off. Then the child would be washed in order to get the blood off. And the next step is the salting of the child. Now, there are a lot of symbols of what salt means in Scripture. In terms of hygiene, the reason for the salting is that the salt is an antibiotic and it's going to kill germs that might be present on the skin of the child. Perhaps a disease it might have contracted from its mother at birth, or to kill anything that has gotten on its skin. So it has a very healthy meaning. That's why it would be salted. Some of the symbols, some will say that the salt is given with the sacrifices of the temple, that this might be preparing a child as an offering. So it's kind of cool that there's a symbolism there that, and I never knew this before either, that the animals that were offered as sacrifices at the temple were salted also. And so the child, when you had a child and you covered your child, and I read somewhere that it was probably like a combination of olive oil. They would take salt and mix it with olive oil and kind of rub that all over the baby's skin. And then the olive oil obviously would help it stick, but the salt, would be as an antibiotic. But it'd also be symbolic of the sacrifices. If you were giving, because the sacrifices that were offered at the temple were the very best, the unblemished lamb, the first, the firstborn male of the flock, and all these things. And it said salt is also a preservative, so it may be done to preserve the life of the child. Of course, that's also the hygienic purpose, is preserving the life of the child. So I just thought it was really interesting, because I never knew that before. I never knew that babies in the time of Jesus were salted at birth, were covered in salt immediately after being born.
Never heard that. I wonder if it's just sort of an antiseptic type thing.
Well, that's one of the theories, is the practical purpose would be the antiseptic purpose, the antibacterial qualities of salt. But there's also the symbolic meaning of, salting a baby the same way that a sacrifice would be given before the Lord. So in a way, it's symbolically a way of offering your child as a living sacrifice to the Lord, like kind of consecrating your baby to God.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting.
Wow, that's cool.
Cool.
Never heard that. Never heard that.
Me neither. Me neither. Good stuff.
So Mary and Joseph, they have to head out because Herod's after them. Well, we know that the baby Jesus, and it's depicted very well in the latest basically Luke 2. I don't know what the what do they call it? The Nativity, the birth of Christ, whatever, the movie that was put out by the church. How when the wise men showed up, the boy was older. I mean, it was a child. It wasn't a baby. Yeah. So it could have been a couple of years before they got to him.
Right.
Which is pretty interesting. So they had to get out of there. They had to leave. Joseph and Mary.
Yeah. So let's talk about how they knew they needed to leave.
You talking about about the dream, Joseph's dream? Right. Yeah, Joseph had a dream.
Yeah. Joseph. So Joseph, he was he had a dream about the dangers with Herod, right? And in the Come Follow Me discussion, there it talks about let's see, it says parents can receive revelation to protect their families, and so I kind of brought up kind of three things here, three ways to be to successfully lead by the Spirit, which is ultimately what Joseph was doing in that moment. He was directed by God through a vision, through his dream to get out of there. Mm-hmm. And number one is to live worthy of the Spirit, right? Which Joseph obviously did. Number two was don't hesitate. Don't hesitate on those promptings. Joseph didn't hesitate. Very next morning, he gets up, takes Mary, and they hightail it out of there.
Yeah.
So I think, how often do we hesitate?
Right.
When we receive promptings?
It's interesting that there's five people, or well, no, I can't count the numbers because we already said we don't know how many wise men, but there's at least a few people here that were saved in two different dreams. The wise men also received a dream not to go back to Herod.
Correct.
Because Herod was going to kill them too, basically.
Yes.
And so they were warned. They didn't go back. And then Joseph gets a dream and says, hey, head to Egypt because they're coming after you. And so the Lord's taking care of all these people that are close to him. I think as we seek the Lord is very close to us, and they're doing things. They're being active. I wish I could remember the quote that most of the time, I think it was maybe Dallin H. Oaks. He said most of the time that we receive revelation is when we're acting. It's not usually when we're laying on the couch.
Right.
Just pondering things or whatever. It can happen, but it's usually when we're up and actively doing something and we're actively going and we're moving. That's when revelation happens. And so you see these people, all these people, Mary, Joseph, and the three wise men, they're all actively doing something. They're moving, they're going, and they receive this information. But yeah, thank goodness they were as close to the Spirit as they were. Obviously, the Lord was going to take care. Obviously, God was going to take care of his son. But it was very important that these two people were very much handpicked by God to be the parents for Jesus Christ on the earth.
You wonder how much preparation the Lord put into these individuals, because when you talk about hesitating on inspiration or promptings, like I know I think I've shared some stories with y'all before where I feel where I've had my own experiences hesitating on what I felt like was a prompting, and then realizing what it was after the fact. Felt horrible when I realized what I had done, when I realized that what I had felt, I believe, was a spiritual prompting, was the Lord trying to tell me something. And then I kind of second guessed it, kind of questioned it, and kind of hesitated, and then the moment is gone. And that can be a horrible feeling. And so I wonder, I mean, I know not everybody in this world is as hard-headed as I am and as difficult to teach, but it does make me wonder if, these individuals like Joseph and, all the people involved that we're just talking about had experiences of their own where the Lord had tested them and had, kind of helped them to understand what it feels like when you're receiving a spiritual prompting, or when something you're receiving is inspiration, when it's not just a weird coincidental dream, or not just a weird feeling, to understand and be able to discern those promptings, because they were acted on quickly. Joseph didn't waste time. He didn't waste a second.
Nope.
I think so. I definitely believe that Joseph had been prepared in different ways and taught how to learn and to follow the Spirit, or to have dreams. My mission president, he encouraged all of us, all of his missionaries, to pray to be taught through our dreams.
Wow.
Interesting concept. Can't say that I've ever had. I can't consciously think of an experience where I've had something like a dream or something like that led to something greater or significance. But it was an interesting concept too. We see it all the time.
I have had
in the
interesting dreams where, when I've lost something, and somebody in a dream tells me where the thing is, and then I wake up and find that it was exactly where the person in the dream told me it was. So little interesting coincidences like that, but I don't think I've ever had anything that definitely that profound. I know there's a Facebook group I'm on that is people, Latter-day Saints who share dreams that they've had and their opinions of, meaning that they've had in their dreams and things like that. It's interesting.
That's interesting.
When you talk about these spiritual experiences, it reminds me of when it says in Luke 2:19, but Mary kept all these things and pondered them in her heart. Some of those things that we have are so spiritual. It's really best not to talk much about them, because it's just so spiritual. First of all, you can't hardly describe it anyway. It's hard to try to put that across to someone. But Boyd K. Packer said this. He said, it is not wise to continually talk of unusual spiritual experiences. They are to be guarded with care and shared only with the Spirit when the Spirit itself prompts you to use them to the blessing of others. He said, I heard Marion G. Romney once counsel mission presidents and their wives. He said, I found out that if I talked too lightly of sacred things, thereafter the Lord would not trust me. So, I mean, I've never thought of it that way, because you almost feel like you're sort of testifying if you go out and tell everything that happens, and just you're trying to tell people, but then the Lord might be saying, hey, that was between me and you.
Right.
I'm not going to maybe do that again for a little while, because you just jump out there and go to, so it's interesting too. There are things to ponder. There are things to share. It was just, as y'all were talking about that, I thought about that verse when she
the Lord knows our hearts. And that's like, throughout the New Testament this year, we're going to see occasions where Jesus healed people and told the individual to go and tell people what you've experienced. And then there's other times where he tells them, you don't talk about this to anyone.
And they still did.
Yeah. But it's interesting to me. It's one of my favorite things about the New Testament, about the record we have of Jesus' teaching, is that he knew the hearts of people so well that some of the things that he says seem conflicting. If you say, well, he said this thing in this instance, but in another instance, he said something different. But it's because he knew the hearts of the people so well that he knew what they needed. He knew what one person wanted, and what one person needs to hear might not be the same as what another person needs to hear. And so it's really cool to think about that. So I think, when it comes to talking about things, if I feel like, there is a place for that, to talk about spiritual things. But if it's talked about lightly, as that quote said, then I believe the Lord knows our hearts. And if
absolutely.
if we're sharing experiences in a way that is uplifting, is something that we should be doing, that's one thing. But if we're not giving it the gravity that it deserves, then
like, hey man, this is so cool. Check this out. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Just
it's kind of like, it reminds me of our conversation with T-Jump. You remember that when, one of the things that I talked about was like, I can't tell you, but I mean, all I can say is that I've had experiences that I can't deny to me. All I can say is that I've experienced things that I can't, but there's no way, even if I tried to explain them to you, even if I could explain what I've thought or what I've seen or what I've experienced, you wouldn't get it. Because it's
not gonna mean anything to you.
Those things are so personal. Yeah. Those experiences that you have between you and God.
It's a direct,
just very sacred.
It's a direct answer from a singular source. I mean, there's no, you can only get that feeling or that experience from God, and you don't believe in God. Okay. Well, you need to, at least say, okay, I just want to know if you are there. We read it in the Book of Mormon, how all that happened with, King Lamoni and stuff. But anyway, but yeah, that's the thing, is you have to want to know for yourself. That's the formula. There's no other way. You can't live off of my experience. I mean, you can't feel, you could probably feel the Spirit if I was able to portray it in a good way, but there's no way that's going to convert you.
Yeah.
You have to get that for yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And so that prayer, I've prayed that same prayer myself before, just that, God, are you there? There was a point in my life where, not to get into the long story, where I fell away from God for quite a long time. And so, while you two were out serving missions and doing the choosing the right, I was living in the
you're going through your own mission
at that time. So
you're going through your own building.
Yeah, I was going through some things of my own. I had to learn some things the hard way.
And look here, we're all in the same place now. So,
I'm a little bit more hard-headed than most, but but yeah, I can say though, that was one of the most profound experiences I've had, is when I prayed that prayer, when it was the first time I prayed in many years, and it was just
because
kind of like crying out, like, God, are you there?
It's all about
I need you. If you're real, I need you to let me know, because I can't handle my life right now. And so I believe he honors that.
That's right. Yeah. It's all about the intent, all about the desire. But yeah.
I wanted to bring up something that Kenny had touched on last week, that I think kind of goes well again here. So Jesus has been born, and we talked about Joseph, and Kenny mentioned that Joseph, we were giving kind of major props to Joseph and how he doesn't get the credit that he necessarily deserves.
Stepped out of the year.
Yeah, exactly. So we talked. Kenny mentioned that that he might not necessarily have those primal instincts to watch over this child that isn't biologically his, right? Whereas a child that is biologically his,
right,
would be more intent on protecting and teaching this child, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've thought about that all week. And on one side, I agree with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other side, I disagree with it just a little bit. And this is why.
Okay.
If you've got somebody that you know and love, and they turn the responsibility of their children over to you, to me, almost that the instincts, the desire to protect them is bumped up a few notches. Yeah. I'll give you two examples. Several years ago, I was part of a Boy Scout group. We took a 10-day road trip all the way out to the Grand Canyon and back. And I was one of four adults. Do what?
That's a long way for our listeners.
Yeah. That's a long way for us. Yeah. My oldest son was with you on that trip.
That's right. That's right. Oh, Kenny was with us. And so I was one of four adults that we were watching over 10 or I don't know, like 10 to 15 young men. I can't remember how many it was. And Kenny, son Kenny was one of those. And watching over them, knowing that we were responsible for those young men, everything was heightened for me personally. especially when we went out to that Grand Canyon and walking around where there's no rails or anything. Okay.
Wow.
I mean, you've got the life of these young men in your hands. And then another example, Marcus, you and I, 2 summers ago, we were chaperones. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Me and my wife, you and your wife were part of
Right.
a chaperone group to a summer trip for the youth, up to North Georgia, whitewater rafting and everything.
Yep.
Again, we were drivers of these 15 passenger vans.
Yep.
And again, to me, it's almost heightened a little bit. So I think about that with Joseph. Joseph has been handed over the responsibility of raising the Son of God. Right. Yeah. And so I think about he is like, holy cow. Think about the responsibility on my shoulders. I've got to do everything, twice as good almost. It's kind of what I'm thinking. It maybe what he was feeling. What are y'all thoughts about that?
I think that's a great point. I know when I like sometimes when I make statements like that I made, I tend to look at things from kind of a biological evolutionary type lens,
which there's truth in it.
Which I think I might have mentioned a situation, with lions, like if when a new male takes over, the first thing he does is kill all the young males, right? Because that's not my bloodline. Yeah. And even with people, we admire men who take over, who marry a woman with children and take on those children as his own. I think it's almost universally recognized that that's an admirable thing. Like, wow, man, you took on those kids and you're teaching them, and just as if they're your own, So I feel like there is a kind of more of a predisposition to have like a natural affinity for our biological children.
Yes.
However, the point you make is really good, and I don't think that I had even thought about it in quite that way. That Joseph understood the assignment. He understood. This is the Son of God that I've been entrusted with.
I think there's an underlying connection to both of those aspects, and that is getting really close to that child. The closer you are and the more you understand that child, the closer you are to that child, the bond that you create with that child, it's more given if it's your own birth child. It's kind of that's almost sort of a given thing. You still have to create a bond with your kids as they grow, obviously, but I think there is a leg up when it is your own actual natural birth.
Often more of it just a natural,
it seems, but yet that can still be that strong as you work with and live with that child and with that child. Just like Jackson was saying about that trip, those kids that were in my van, those were my kids. I mean, I did have my kids in that van, my actual kids. But I can promise you there's a gunman that got on there. If my kids were in the store when the gunman, I'm still going to probably put my life in between me and them. I mean, they're not my kids, and maybe I'm looking to see where my kids are at, but hey, these are my kids too right now. You know what I mean? Yeah. But there is a difference, but yet it can be.
I think it's
not exclusive.
Right. But I think it's because of the love, that we have of their parents and those children. So getting back to Joseph's love of God and understand the responsibility. I think that's kind of
and you can argue that there's sort of that's happening in the household of Jesus Christ with Mary and with Joseph. Mary, it being her actual son, right? She as Jesus grows up, that bond with Mary and her son, obviously a mother to a son is stronger anyway than a father to a son or whatever, probably, or whatever. But anyway, I'm not a scientist is what I'm saying. But
I think most people would agree though that the bond
I think
between
a
mother and her baby is not much that can compete with that. Yeah,
that's true. That's true. And so you have that going on with Mary and Jesus, and then of course you have Joseph and Jesus, and you can see and you can sort of go, well, these two people had a witness that this is the Son of God. At this point, you would say Mary's witness is stronger because she's the actual mother. Maybe a few more things happened, obviously, that she saw and the Spirit with her more or whatever. And then Joseph, of course, has had his spiritual things that go on, but most of those are just, hey, protect this kid. A lot of it seems that way. Protect your wife, protect the kid. make sure that he's born safely, make sure you find, all these things. But yet as he grows up, I can promise you, I think I'm just thinking of how Jesus waxed in his knowledge and the way that he grew. I think the parents did the same thing in the testimony that they had that he was the Savior. I think Joseph waxed in his testimony as he continued. We know about it when they find Mary kind of freaks out. They can't find Jesus. Where's he at? He's in the temple. I think eventually, as they got older and as he got older, they didn't really question that anymore, especially after that experience. They start to understand more that, yes, that's true. He is at his father's house. I mean, that is his literal father, is, God the Father. So I don't know. I just look at it like it's just something where you just day by day, it gets stronger. The knowledge gets stronger. The bond gets stronger. The testimony becomes stronger. And it's not something that happened to this little family all at once where you go, this is the Son of God. And Joseph was like, I'm completely 100% on board. Let's go with this thing. I think he had to grow into that.
Work
into that. So it just gives me comfort to know that once again, here's some normal people. You know what I mean? Right. It's like these are not special robotic, people that just the Lord created to do these crazy things. I mean, they're literal, just regular people, and I say that cautiously. I'm sure if I even get a glimpse of where Joseph is, in the next
I think
life,
we understand we definitely understand.
Yeah, I hope I'm near, at least near where he's at,
when
we get there. But yeah, so but they find Jesus in the temple, and so they're all kind of like, worried where he's at. But I think about that, about how he's found in the temple his whole life, man. Jesus was found in the temple his whole life, all the way back to whenever Anna and who was it? Simeon and Anna saw him whenever they brought him to be blessed, and they seen him in the temple. I mean, Jesus was in the temple from day one, dude. I mean, he's
just house, man, house of the Lord. Yeah. What's up?
He's just there all the time.
That's right.
And
something else that's really cool to me. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say
that verse. I
was just going to tag on the end of that. I'm sorry, that his apostles were continually in the temple even after he left, just because that's what he taught them, And so, obviously, if you're taught by Christ, you're going to do what he did. But yeah, temple's pretty central to everything that Christ has done and who he is.
Absolutely, that continues to this day.
Mm-hmm.
So. Yeah, so verse 46, I get a little excited sometimes and try to jump the gun there, but in where it says he came to pass that 3 days they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the doctors, both hearing them and asking them questions. Joseph Smith translation words that a little bit differently. Are you aware of that?
Bring it.
Instead of saying that he was sitting in the midst of them, hearing them and asking them questions, it said they were hearing him and asking him questions. And that makes a lot of sense, because in the very next verse, the next verse makes more sense. And all that heard him were astonished at his understanding and answers. So obviously he was sitting among the learned men, and he wasn't just listening to them and asking them questions. They were actually asking him questions. And we know that he might have been asking them questions, but the questions we know from his later ministry all through the New Testament, the questions that Jesus asked were often instructional. So right. he used the Socratic method, which is, the asking questions. Instead of just telling people things, right. He would ask them a question that would make them think and then kind of figure it out on their own.
See, I didn't have that. I didn't have that Joseph Smith quote. I had this part for the verse 47. Did you have that one? I think it might be an extension of the one that you read. But I'll read what it says for 47. It says the prophet Joseph Smith taught that as a boy, Jesus Christ possessed superior intelligence to all mortals. When still a boy, he had all the intelligence necessary to enable him to rule and govern the kingdom of the Jews, and could reason with the wisest and most profound doctors of law and divinity, and make their theories and practice to appear like folly compared to the wisdom he possessed. I thought that was just very fascinating that at that age, he was far beyond where they were. It's almost like a superpower. I mean, it is easy to look at this like superpower. It's like but yeah, they were astonished. That's why they say they were astonished. These guys, these priests, man, they're devoted their whole life to this, and then they're just sitting there going, this little kid, where has he learned this? It says, actually, let me say this, just
and it had to have been good too, because that that even if you imagine the smartest child you've ever met your entire life, if they're in the midst of like they're a bunch of doctors or professors trying to like act like they're going to school them, they're going to dismiss what they're saying. Like, okay, kid, calm down, sit down. You need to. Children need to be seen and not heard. We're the ones who know what we're talking about around here. But so to me, the fact that they weren't discounting him, the fact that they were all amazed, that they were all sitting around this kid going, "Holy cow!
Yeah,
this kid is smart."
Like completely astonished, like just blown away.
Can you imagine what he must have been saying? I can't even imagine.
And he's probably like, it's because I created this planet you're standing on right now. It's like, whoa, wait, what?
Yeah.
Like, golly. I mean, it's just really, it's like, no, but Joseph Smith translation for Matthew chapter 2, verse 23, or actually it would be Joseph Smith translation, Matthew 3, 24 through 26. And it taught, this is Matthew's part, but it's talking about the same thing. It says this, and he served under his father, talking about Jesus Christ, and he served under his father, and he spake not as other men, neither could he be taught, for he needed not that any man should teach him. And after many years, the hour of his ministry drew nigh. And this is the key thing here. It says the phrase, for he needed not that any man should teach him, indicates that Jesus was taught, but not by man. The Savior explained that he was taught by his Father, and that's in John 8. So that's where his teachings came from, was from the supreme being, from the all-knowing God, and that's where he got his teachings from, which is why he was able to astonish these scholars. So pretty interesting.
Yeah, the thing that I always think about, and I'm just kind of blown away by just imagining it, but Christ, as he grew, figuring out and realizing who he was. I mean, that's intense to me. To go through that process and realizing, like, holy cow. I mean, I can imagine him almost having that experience of like, what in the world?
So it's really interesting. And I know you have to take this stuff with a grain of salt, because we don't know how much truth there is to it. But the apocryphal writings have some really interesting stories about Jesus' childhood.
Okay.
Him performing miracles as a child. And so, like I said, we don't know
why not?
We don't know if it's true. Like there's two stories that stood out to me that I've read. I know one of the stories, when Jesus was a small child, he was down by the river, and he was taking clay from the riverside and making it into the shapes of little birds. And he had fashioned several little birds out of clay, and then he brought them to life, and other people saw the birds come to life and fly away.
Wow.
And
and why not?
Yeah. And then there's another story that's kind of this is a really strange one, though, where, we know from the experience of, the people lowered the bed through the top of the house, to get to Jesus. People used to hang out on the rooftops and things like that. So there were children playing on the rooftops of one of the houses, and one of the children fell and broke their neck and died. And the other children were trying to say that we're accusing Jesus of pushing them. They're saying, Jesus pushed him off. Jesus pushed him off. And so the story goes that Jesus brought the child back to life, basically, so he could tell him, no, he's not the one who pushed me.
Wow.
So, why have I never heard these stories?
That's pretty cool.
Holy cow!
Like I said, like I said, this is like the apocryphal writings. I've read a lot of that stuff just because it's interesting, and it's interesting. But like I said, you kind of have to take those with a grain of salt. They might be true. They might be completely false.
Right.
There might be a little bit of truth through that we don't know.
I think even Joseph Smith studied some of the apocryphal writings, but he was always adamant about, you got to take it. You don't really look at it as inspired scripture, but it can enhance and make you think, and it can increase your testimony of Jesus Christ, but it's not canonized scripture that we recognize as canon. But we'll know those things one day. I mean, we'll know about that kind of stuff, and Jesus will tell us himself. If you ever read Jesus the Christ by James E. Talmage, he mentions things. he mentions things about the childhood of Christ that you just get the feeling that, okay, he had to hear that from Christ himself. I mean, it literally, there's things in that book which he wrote it in an upper room in the temple that they dedicated to him, just for him to have to write this book.
Salt Lake Temple, yes.
It was an assignment from the first presidency. This was an apostle writing it. So, I mean, he's I'm just saying he's got access to, he's a special witness. I really feel like, and I don't know this for sure, but I feel like Jesus Christ himself could have dictated some of those things to him to put in there that he thought were meaningful and would be uplifting. But man, that is a powerful book, by the way. But anyway, and then at the end, Mary and Joseph, they get on to Jesus. Don't you scare me like that again, boy.
Oh yeah.
No, and he has the ultimate mic drop, right?
That's right. I mean, he tells them, he says, and he went down with him. He said, okay. He said, I'm coming with you.
So that, I think that's a really, really important lesson. Subject. That's another thing that I didn't think about. And once again, I'm gonna give props to Scripture Gems, Brother Fulmer on YouTube. Y'all check him out, because one of the points they made that I've never thought about before was, at this point, they're getting on to him. They're crawling his butt, because if anybody that's had a child that's went missing for any period of time, that the panic, the horrible panic. Yeah, Jackson.
And the horrible panic when you have someone else's child that you're responsible for.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, all right. That's it.
Okay, so both.
You know what I'm saying?
So we got both going on here, and so they're getting on to him. Then he says to them, "How is it that ye sought me? Wist ye not that I must be about my Father's business?"
Yeah.
So he schooled him. I mean, he wasn't ugly, but he was like, "Listen, you know who I am.
Right.
You know I've got important business to take care of." But
yeah,
here's the thing that really got me. And he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was subject unto them.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, like, he understood his role. And this gives me chills right now thinking about it, because even at this young age, Jesus knew who he knew who he was. At some level, he had inkling of who he was and what his mission was already. And even then, he understood the importance of honoring your parents,
right?
Because they were like, "Jesus, I don't care what you're doing. You had us scared to death." And I can imagine Mary just wagging her finger and it's like, "Don't you scare me like that." And so he went, and it says he went with them, and he was subject to this. So he didn't push back. He didn't argue. He said, "Okay, let's go. I'll do what you tell me to do." So it really, the humility there, I had never thought about it before. Before I heard them talk about
the willingness,
that's
humility,
really profound.
The control, the self-control that he had.
Yeah.
Think about the temptations of Christ that we know of, the famous temptation, which we'll talk about later in another lesson. But think about how in this moment, you can't tell me that Lucifer was not on him at this moment also, where he could have easily just stood over his parents and said,
"Tell him who you are, man.
Get out of my way."
Obviously, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Get out of my way. I'm not listening. I don't have to listen to you. You know what I'm saying, or whatever. Right. But let me read this quote real quick before
hold right there before you read it. He could have looked Joseph in the eye. He could have looked Joseph in the eye and said, "You're not my dad."
Yeah. He sure could have.
My daddy.
You're not my dad.
But it's that. So he was a presidency of the 70 elder Cecil O. Samuelson Jr. So this was 2001 Ensign, Our Duty to God. He said this. He said, "You must remember that your duty to God is very clearly linked to your duties to your own family members, particularly your parents. It is not only in being properly subject or submissive to God, but also to parents and priesthood leaders that we can truly fulfill our duty to God." Jesus Christ had a perfect knowledge of all this stuff. And I mean, and his mother was mortal, but that is his mother. Right. That is his mother also. So his father said, "Go here," but his mother said, "Come over here," and you are subject to your parents, and should be. That's and right. So he obeyed both of them, literally. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, I got it right.
And like most dads, right? Heavenly Father's like, yeah, son, go ahead and listen to your mother.
That's right. That's right. That's what I was thinking.
I need you over here in the temple, but what you just go ahead and listen to your mama, okay? Go ahead and go back.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's what a good father does, right?
That's right. Yeah.
They're like, okay, well, you listen to your mom. Listen to your mother.
You can at least tell me where he's going to be at, okay? I can hear the mother. You can at least tell me. Give me a heads up.
I think I told y'all about Chase. Chase is our most vocal. What do you
energetic.
call it? Vocal, energetic. One that loves to push back. I mean, he pushes back, right? So I can't remember if I said on here or not, but he accused me of being scared of Amanda.
Shoot!
Yeah, we're seriously
them fighting words.
Listen, so we've been sitting on the second pew for a long time now, but we sat on the first pew for a while. Mm-hmm. But we moved to the second pew. Chase preferred to sit on the first pew. Amanda likes for us to all sit on the same pew. She doesn't want us separated.
Right.
And so Chase was wanting to sit on that first pew, and I said, Chase, no. I said, listen, and I explained. I said, your mama wants us all sitting right here, right, all together and stuff. And that's when he said, you're just scared of mama. And I said, anyway, it caught me off guard, and I just, it's one of those situations where I'm laughing and I'm having to keep my composure, and I'm like, Chase, first of all, I'm not scared of your mama, okay?
Yeah.
Let's get that clear, okay? And then I explained we're on the same page and stuff. Fast forward about 30 minutes. Chase, he has it, so we're all on the second pew, and Chase has his feet, and he's got his shoes on, and they're up on the back of the pew in front of us, right?
Right.
And so, and I see him over there, and so they're not at the top, right? So other people can't see him, but they are pressed up against the back of the other one. Anyway, and I'm not. Chase knows I see his feet, and he's on the right side, and Amanda's on the left side, and then Amanda sees it. And she says, Chase, put your feet down. And I'm like, yeah, Chase, put your feet down, And he says, see, you don't ever say anything until mama says it, And I'm like, hey, listen, that's how we work. Okay. I'm backing your mama up. That's it. You just understand that, boy.
I'm just glad that these conversations are being had in other families. I thought this was exclusively for my family. Like, man, I've heard all these things.
Absolutely.
Gracious. Hey, and it don't change much either when they're in their 20s. I mean, come on.
Right.
But yeah.
Well, what else y'all got? Y'all got anything else?
Oh, I mean, I think we pretty much covered it, man.
Yeah.
Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man.
As so should we.
Yeah. Good. A good blueprint to follow for sure.
Right. Exactly.
Well, very good. Until next time, y'all keep on striving.
Good deal.
Can we try and do a little thing we hadn't done in a while of just kind of promote and say, hey, subscribe, check us out on Facebook.
Let's do it.
Sure we can. Please subscribe. Please.
There you go. Either one way out.
Man. What are you, a loser?
Subscribe now.
Yeah,
that's right.
So hit
what
that.
Are you, a loser? You don't want to learn about the gospel? Come on over. Subscribe.
Right.
And the way I see it, look, if you've made it this far, then if you've been listening, watching, if you've obviously either something we've said has been insightful or funny or ridiculous. I don't know, something. There's got to be some value. So if you've made it this far, hit that subscribe button. If you haven't done it already, just subscribe.
Yep. My goodness, it's so easy. It's so easy to do.
And if you're coming across us for the first time, be sure and subscribe.
Maybe we should say all those things. This is the promo, ain't it? You've already recorded
right here.
This is it.
That's right. If you're on YouTube, hit that little bell, the subscribe bell. If you're on your favorite podcast platform, just
don't you miss it.
Subscribe button. with your finger. You put your little finger on it on your cell phone and just touch it with your little finger. Where it says
and
subscribe.
Specifically on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, you can leave a review and a rating. So be sure and do that as well. Leave us a review, leave us a rating. It helps out. Even if you've done one a couple years ago, jump back in there and do it again.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Definitely.
And finally, you can find us on Facebook.
And
as well.
I like for those reviews to be honest too, because if there's you don't have to be mean, but constructive feedback is helpful. If there's something that you feel like, man, y'all are doing okay, but if you do something a little bit different, it might be better. Hey, I'm open to hear that stuff. I know I can definitely always improve.
Actually, on Apple, we actually are straight. We've received 37 reviews.
Wow.
And we are 5 stars all the way.
Wow.
Yep. No, nothing less than 5 stars. So pretty cool.
Hang out with the cool kids. Hit subscribe.
That's right. Facebook. Find us on Facebook. Saints in the South Facebook group, as well as Saints in the South page. Check it out.
And while you're there on the group, contribute.
How long is this promo? Yeah, let's have some discussions, man. Bring it,
man. Yeah, I know we post stuff and try to get some discussion going, but man, there's people be lazy. People just aren't as talkative as they.
People just want to look at pictures.
Yeah.
So hey, comment with a picture.
There you go.
I like it.
Hey, I like memes, man. You can just throw some memes our way.
GIFs, memes. Wait, is it GIFs or GIFs? start that debate.
Funny story. Actually, I said I when I first saw the word, I said GIFs, but then like somebody corrected me and acted like I was dumb. It's like GIFs, and so everybody said GIFs. I was like, well, it's GIFs. Even there was a website where you could that was called Jiffy, GIF. It wouldn't make sense to say Giphy. That's dumb. So Jiffy. Yeah. So for years. I said GIF. Then it turns out that I was right all along. It's actually, what is it? Graphic image format. I think is what it said. Something like that. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the G. It is a G with a hard G sound. It's supposed to be GIF. And so, so then I was like, see, I was right.
Told you so.
That means
I gave in to the peer pressure. That's your lesson. Kids, don't give in to peer pressure.
But
is right.
You hear our peer pressure right now. You subscribe.
That's right. Unless you hear Saints in the South trying to peer pressure you into subscribing.
Right.
Then that's peer pressure.
Nothing happens except we just become cooler. That's it. So there's nothing to lose here.
longest promo ever.
Longest promo in the world.
There we go.
If you have sat through this promo and you haven't hit the subscribe button, something's wrong with your fingers. That's right. I don't know what he's saying.
Maybe I can split some stuff up and tie it together and get something out of that.
It'd be hilarious.
Or just post the whole thing uncut and see what.
There you go.